Now we're going to add a HUD display, otherwise known as a heads-up display. Now the reason this is different than the other layers is that it's not going to move. So as we go across the screen, the layer that's our HUD layer is not going to move. So that's going to be where we store our score, keep track of other information about our game. So it's always on the screen no matter what. And the HUD is always going to be your topmost layer. So let's go ahead and add a new layer. We'll add it at the top. I'm just going to call it HUD, H-U-D. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to set this parallax value to 0, 0. Now the parallax decides how the layers move in conjunction with each other. When they're 100, 100, and this is going to be X and Y axes, they move at the same rate as each other. If we set one to 0, 0, and the other at 100, 0, then one is going to move and the other is not. So our HUD is not going to move. So anything we put on the HUD is going to need to be within this Windows size here where this dotted line is. And wherever we set it, it's not going to move. Now that we have our HUD, we're going to go ahead and create a couple of labels on this HUD display. Now you'll see that it says HUD because I have my HUD selected as my layer. So I'm going to go ahead and put them down here. This is actually going to be our score. So I'm going to say score colon. I'm going to call this score label. And then I'm going to adjust this just a little bit. I'm going to make it, I think I'm going to make mine white. And remember, this green is transparent. At runtime, it's invisible, so that's not going to show up. I'm going to just make it a little bit larger. There we go. And then I'm going to just go ahead and adjust these so that the alignment is right, so that they line up perfect. Now, in addition to a score, I'm going to go ahead and clone that, and I'm going to create something that we call attempts. And this will be how many times we launch something. So we're just going to keep track of how many of our ammo we're going to actually launch. So I'm going to make that a little bit larger, and then I'm going to relabel this attempts label. Then I'm going to add 2 more, and these are going to be to actually store those values. So let's go ahead and clone this again. And this one I'm going to just set to 0 because it's going to start off as 0. And I'm going to change the alignment on this so that it's left, so that things line up perfectly there. And then I'm going to set this to score value so I know what it is. And then I'm going to do one more, and I'm going to call it right below here. So I'm just going to clone that. And this one I'm going to call attempts value. And that'll store how many times we launch. Now I'm just going to go ahead and test this. We don't have any logic for our score or our attempts just yet, but I want to show you how this HUD works before we get too far down. So let's just go ahead and run this. And what we're going to see is that when we launch our cannon, this is not going to move. This is always going to be right there on the screen. So you see it's always on the top part of the screen, no matter where the camera is pointing. So that's how a HUD works. Now let's go ahead and keep track of the score and the attempts that are being made. So on the event sheet, let's go ahead and add 2 variables. We'll call it score and attempt. And both of them will start out at 0. Now the attempt, we're just going to put right here. So every time we do the mouse left click, we're going to say system add 2, and we'll do attempt, and we'll add 1. And then for the score, right down here where a prize hits the ground and explodes, we're going to add 100 to our score. So let's just go ahead and say add score 100. And then we'll move this up so that it's towards the top here. Now we're going to actually change this logic here in just a minute, but right now this is how that's going to work. Now we're going to put the every tick in so that we can keep track of the scores on the screen. So I'm just going to right click here, and I'm going to say add new event below. I'm going to keep these 2 every ticks right next to each other. We have this other every tick which is tied to the mouse to aim our cannon, This one's just going to happen regardless of where the mouse is. So then we'll say add, and then we're going to use this one right here, the attempts value, and then we're going to use set text, and we're going to set that to the variable attempt, the one that we created a minute ago. Then we're going to add one more, and we're going to say score value, and we're going to say set text, and this is going to be the score. And it's going to be this score variable. Now we'll go ahead and run that and test to see that it works. So there you can see it here. Now as we launch the ammo, you can see the attempts moving, and you can see the score adjusting as well. So each time we launch the cannon, the attempts will go up by 1, and then every time one of the stars hits the platform, we'll get 100 added to our score. Now we're going to add a just label that pops up every time one of our prizes hits the ground. It's just going to say plus 100, just as a kind of a scorekeeper. Now we're still on the HUD display. I'm going to actually change this to the main display, and I'm going to just move this because it got placed on the main. So this is how we can move it from one layer to the other. Now I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. I'm going to say plus 100 because that's going to be our score. I'm going to change our font to red, and then I'm also going to increase the font size and make it bold. So you can kind of see this will be the label that appears. It will say like plus 100, indicating that you've got a score. Let's go ahead and rename this, and we'll rename this to score prize. So that we can find it here on our event sheet. So right here, when the prize hits the ground and gets destroyed, let's just go ahead and display that. So we'll say prize, and just like with the explosion, we're going to do spawn another object, but this time it's going to be this right here, this score prize, the value or the edit box we just created. We want to make sure this shows up on the main level, our layer. If it shows up on the HUD or the background, we're not going to be able to see it. The image point is fine. We're going to move this up to the top here before the prize gets destroyed. And then I'm going to do one more thing, and that is that this is going to rotate depending on the angle of the prize. The score will be on an angle as well, but I'd like it to be perfectly straight. So I'm going to add one more action, and I'm going to say score prize, set angle, and I'm going to set it to 0 because 0 is horizontal. And I'm just going to move this up to the top. All right, now when we shoot the cannon, we want to have a trail of kind of dots indicating where that last shot was. So we're going to go ahead and add just a single small sprite, and then we're going to have the ammo create and spawn those as it goes across the screen. So let's create a new sprite, and we're going to place this off the screen as well on the main layer. And we can go ahead and use this icon here. It's just called trail. And what it is it's just a white circle with a transparent background. So you can see it doesn't show up very well here, but it works perfect for what we're doing. We'll go ahead and close that. And then this, we don't need very large at all. We're going to make it quite small. So we're just going to make this about, we'll probably do 25, 25 for the size. So we'll place this off the screen. Let's go ahead and rename this to trail. So this will be the trail of where the ammo goes. So now we want to actually put the logic in to kind of leave these little trailing dots as the ammo goes across the screen. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to add an event, and we're going to say while the ammo has a velocity of a certain amount, we're just going to spawn those little objects, and then we'll use the fade behavior so that they don't stick around forever. So let's go ahead and add in the logic here. So we'll say add new event, and then we're going to use the ammo, and then we're going to say is velocity, is angular, is velocity. So we're going to say is velocity x, which is our xy, And we're just going to try, and your value may be a little bit different, but I'm going to say if mine is greater than 100. So once it gets below 100, that means it's kind of sitting down on the ground, or it's really slowly moving, or maybe it's falling, in which case we don't want those dots to appear. So the x velocity greater than 100. And then we want to check this periodically because we don't want to do it just constantly, because it'll just be one long stripe across the screen. So let's add a second condition, add condition. And the second condition is going to be, we're just going to use this every x seconds, and we're going to say every 0.05. So a really small number, but every 0.05 seconds, as long as the velocity is greater than 100, we're going to go ahead and create one of these little dots. So the action for that is going to be, we're going to say ammo, and we're going to say spawn another object, and we're going to spawn this trail, and we need to make sure that we put it on the main layer. And the image point 0 is fine. It's going to be right in the middle. And then the second thing that we're going to do, just like with the ammo itself, we want that trail to be put to the bottom of the layer. And the reason we're moving it to the bottom of the layer is it won't go behind our background, because our background is on a different layer, but it will go behind our cannon. And as the ammo is going across the screen, it'll also be behind the ammo. So it kind of has this effect of following it. Now, right now, they're not going to get destroyed, so we're just going to shoot them, but then we're going to use fade here in a second. So let's go ahead and test this. All right, so you can see how those dots are forming across the screen as the ammo goes flying. So this is going to restart the layer here, but now you can see, so now we have this. Now, as I overshot it there, you'll see as it goes back, you can see the projectile of it. Now you'll notice it's a little bit wavy. And the reason it's wavy is because we've got it set so that it's allowed to spin as it goes out. So we'll fix that here in a minute. All right, so we need to set a couple of properties for this trail so that it looks correct. So let's go back and we'll click on the trail. The first thing we're going to add is we're going to add this behavior of fade, because we want it to slowly fade out. So we want it to be long enough that you can see where the last one went, but we don't want it to last forever. Now you can use a different value, but what I used is we'll leave this set on activate as yes, destroy, and the fade out is also set correctly. And we're going to set a wait time of 5 seconds. So it'll be 5 seconds, and then after 5 seconds, it will start to fade out for 1 second. All right, so let's run that and let's see. All right, so this is actually going to reset because I knocked one of those over. Let me shoot it up in the air here. And then we'll see that this will now fade out after 5 seconds. Perfect. So we're going to change how this layer resets here in just a minute, but that's how we now have this trail, and now as the cannon reloads, we can see where we launched the last one, so we can adjust if necessary. Okay, one thing we forgot to do was to have our score prize actually fade out. So right now it'll actually stay on the screen forever, but we don't want that to happen. So just like with the trail, as it goes across the screen, it fades out. We want this score prize to fade. So let's go back here. We'll click on our score prize. Let's go ahead and add fade. And we're going to do something somewhat similar here. We're going to give it a wait time of, let's say, 2 seconds. And then it'll fade out. So it'll be on the screen for a little bit. That way we'll be able to see it. And then here on the action, it'll automatically start as soon as it gets displayed on the screen, and then it'll wait those 2 seconds. So that's all we need to do in order to have that automatically fade out. Okay, let's go ahead and add some additional layouts. So let's go back to our projects. Now what we're going to do now is we're going to use this duplicate just because we want to keep everything that we've been doing. So let's right click, say duplicate, and it'll create layout 1 or 2. Now remember, we have to double click on this to open it because right now we only have layout 1 open. So now we have layout 2 open. It is identical since we just duplicated it. But now we're going to go ahead and edit this layer. All right, so now that we've got a second layout, second level, we're going to change a few things on the layout itself, and then we'll change the logic as to how we go from layout 1 to 2. The first thing we're going to do is when we first created these blocks, we just had the one block. But what we want to do is we want to have it so that if we hit the block 3 times or 2 times, depending on how many animations we want to put in, the block will actually destroy. So right now we just have the one block. So let's go ahead and edit this, and we're going to add a second animation. So we're going to leave this one as is for now. We're going to come back to it in a minute. But let's add another animation, and we'll just call this block 2. And then we're going to select block 2. Now we're going to set the speed to 0 because we're not going to have it animate. We're going to go through the animation ourselves. So we're going to set that speed to 0. And now we're going to import the frames that we want to use. So right click, import from files. Now I provided 2 different blocks. One is just perfectly straight, thin straight one, and then another is a square block. So let's just go ahead and use this first one. We're going to click these 3. We're going to import all 3 of them. And then we're going to delete the first animation frame. Now what you'll notice is that these blocks have this effect like they're being broke, and then eventually they'll break entirely. So that's the effect that we want. So if we hit it 3 times, it'll then get destroyed. So let's go ahead and create another block, and we'll use that square block. So we'll do the same thing. New animation. We'll call this block 3. And then if we select block 3, we'll set speed to 0. And then we're going to go ahead and import in the animation frames of this square one. And then we'll go ahead and delete frame 0. So that's all we're going to do here. So now we have 2 new animations. We've got it called block 2 and block 3. Now let's rename block 1 to block 1 so that we have 1, 2, and 3. Now this one I don't have any additional animation frames for. So what you can do is you can just have this one be one hit that'll then get destroyed. So that'll be kind of the easy level. Then as we get into harder levels, you'll have to hit them 3 times. Now that we have our additional animations, right here, and again, we're on layout 2. This is our level 2. So we'll leave layout level 1 the same, but now level 2 we want to make a little bit different. Right here is where we can set that initial animation. So this doesn't fill it in or anything, so you just have to remember what you called it. So I'm going to type in block 2. That's what we called this long square block. And you'll see here, this is what it looks like. And then I'm going to do that, and I'm going to just go ahead and delete these other 2 because I want to have this layer be just this one block. And I'm actually going to make mine a little bit smaller. I'm going to make it about this big. Now I'm going to go ahead and create a new level here with this block, and I'll show you what I did here in a second. All right, so here's the structure that I created just with each of those blocks. Now one of the things that you may have noticed is that the background when we duplicate the layer is not locked. So you may want to come in and lock your background so you don't accidentally drag it when you're laying out your layer. But this is how I've created mine. And now you can see I've got a bunch of different stars, and they're kind of laid out a little bit different in structure. Just as we get into deeper layer levels, we want to make it a little bit more complicated. All right, so now we still need to change some of the logic behind this because we don't have any good way of going from level 1 to level 2. Now that we have our structure set up, we want to change some of the logic to go from one level to the next level. Previously, what we were doing is once the prize hit the ground, it just restarted the level. But we don't want it to do that anymore. So let's go ahead and delete this restart layout right here. And then we can delete this wait 3 seconds as well. So it'll just look just like this. we want to create a new kind of end level rule. So what we'll do here instead is we're going to go ahead and use the system compare two values, and we'll go ahead and compare the prize.count. So this is how many of those prizes are on the screen. When it hits 0, they've all been destroyed. That'll be our trigger to go to the next level. So once that prize count hits 0, we're just going to wait 3 seconds just so that we can see the animation. So let's go wait, and we'll wait 3 seconds. Again, this will be just so that we get that last explosion to take place, and we're going to also show those prize scores, so we want to be able to see those. So we'll wait 3 seconds, and then we're going to use the system go to next previous, and then we'll use next. So we've used that a number of times, but that just takes us to the next logical level on the list of levels right here. So from level 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and so on. Okay, let's go ahead and test this. I did actually simplify level 1 a little bit just so that we could test it. Real quick, we're going to change it so these blocks can actually be broke in just a minute. But for right now, I just wanted to make sure I could easily go from level 1 to level 2. So let's see if we can knock that star down to the ground. There we go. And now we should be able to go on to level 2. Now you can see a much more complicated structure that I built. Now the problem that you'll notice is that it's really hard to get these prizes down on the ground without being able to break the blocks. Just because we have so many blocks, some of them that are on the top are going to be really, really hard to actually get to the bottom now. So what we're going to do is we're going to set it up so that if a block gets hit 3 times, it'll go ahead and break. That'll just make it a little bit easier. The original Angry Birds did something similar as well. So let's go ahead and change that. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a new event, and this event is going to be when ammo on collision with another object, and we're going to pick block. And then we're going to add a second condition because we don't want it to just hit. So if the ammo is just on top of a block and then it just falls a little bit, or a block falls on it, we don't want it to destroy the block. We only want it if the block is actually being launched and moving. So we're going to go ahead and add another condition, and we're going to say if ammo, we're going to use the physics, the is velocity, and we're going to say if the x velocity is greater than 200. So in other words, it's moving, kind of like what we were doing when we were spawning the tail. So if it's greater than 200 means it's kind of crashing into a block as opposed to maybe a block just falling down. So we're going to create this as 2 conditions. If collides with block, and then if velocity is greater than 200. And then we're going to add a subcondition on top of this. So we're going to right click, and you have to right click over here in this space where they're both selected. And we're going to say add a subcondition, and that subcondition is going to be block, and we're going to compare frame because we want to know when we're on the last frame. So if you remember, our first block only has 1 frame, but blocks 2 and 3 have multiple frames. So what we're going to say is we're going to say if it equals, and we're going to say block dot, and then there's this variable here called animation frame count, which is the number of frames. Now, in order to check to see if we're the last frame, we have to actually subtract 1. So add -1 to this here. So if it equals block.animation frame count -1 is going to be our sub. All right, so we're going to add another condition, and this is going to be something we haven't done before. It's the else condition. So if this is not true, so in other words, if it's not the last frame, we want to do something different. So we're going to right click right here, and we're going to say add another condition, or I'm sorry, add, and then we're going to say add a sub event, and we're going to go into system, and there's this one in here called else. So we're going to select that. So this is going to say if the animation frame is the last one, we're going to do something. Otherwise, do something different. So if this is the last animation frame, we've hit it 3 times or 1 time, depending on how many frames we have, we're going to destroy that block. So we're going to just do a standard destroy. Now, if it's not the last animation frame, what we want to do is we want to increment to the next animation frame. So if you remember in our block, right here, block 2, we've got 3 animations. So we want it to start here. When it gets hit once, we want it to go to here, which shows a little bit breakage. When it gets hit a third time, we're going to go here. It's going to show much more breakage. And then when it gets hit a fourth time, or the third time, the last time, then it'll get destroyed altogether. So right here on this else, we're actually going to do block, and we're going to say set frame, because we want to the next frame, and we're going to use block dot animation frame, which is the current frame, and then we're going to add one to go to the next frame. Okay, so now we have the logic here where we say on ammo collision with block, assuming the ammo is actually moving, if the last frame was just displayed, then we want to destroy the block because it's now been broke. Otherwise, we want to just move the animation frame forward front 1. So let's go ahead and test this on level 2 where I have multiple animation frames. All right, so as you see, as the ammo hits, some of those blocks are now changing to the second animation frame. Now, as I launch it a second time, you'll see those are now getting switched to the next animation frame. And now when I hit it a third time, they're actually going to break. So you see that first one broke, and I missed that second one. We'll go ahead and hit it again. I missed it again. But you can see how they're actually getting more and more broke based on the number of times they're hit. And it only counts if the ammo is actually flying and gets hit, not if it just slides. So now you can see we can actually break those individual blocks. All right, so this game has gotten a little bit more complicated, and it's kind of annoying that we can just shoot one at a time. So let's go ahead and change that. Let's go ahead and allow the user to fire up to 5 times at once. So let's change this right here, and we're going to say if less than or equal to 5. So this will allow us to click the mouse button 5 times. So let's go ahead and run that and see. This will make it a lot easier to continue to hit those blocks once they've been broken. So we can go ahead and just continue to fire up to 5 times. And you can see some of these are actually breaking as they're getting hit. And we're keeping track of the number of attempts. All right, but we can only shoot 5. Once we click it 6, 7 times, it won't. And then as soon as some of those ammos disappear, then we can fire some more. All right? All right, the next thing we're going to add is as the cannon shoots an ammo, if we press the spacebar, and this will be kind of a little bit of a cheat if you know that it exists, it'll go ahead and spawn an additional ammo just so that you've got 2. The original Angry Birds did something similar to this. As the bird was flying, if you had a certain bird type, you could split that into 2 birds and shoot. So we're going to do something similar to that. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to go back to our layout. We're going to go ahead and add the keyboard. So we'll add keyboard because we're going to trigger it using the space bar. So then we're going to say add a new event, space bar, on key press, and then we're going to use the space. And we don't want to do this every single time. We only want to do this if there's only 2 ammos on the screen. Because because we changed it so you've got 5 on the screen now, if you were to then hit the space bar, all 5 of them would spawn, which isn't what we want to do because that would just create way too many. So what we'll instead do is we'll add another condition, and we'll say this will only be true if, system compare 2 values. And what we're going to compare is ammo.count. And we're going to say if it's less than 2, so if there's less than 2 on the screen, then you can actually press the space bar and spawn an additional ammo. Now the action for this is just ammo, and then we're going to say spawn another object, and we're going to spawn another ammo, and we need to make sure we put this on the main layer, and image point is 0. We're going to go ahead and move that ammo that we just spawned to the bottom of the layout, just so that it shows up with the other ammo, and it's underneath the other things that are on the screen, depending on where it gets launched. And then the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to actually apply force to it, because without a force, it'll actually just fall right straight to the ground, because at that point it will have no force. So we're going to go in and we're going to say apply force. And what we're going to do for the force is we're going to use the same force as the ammo that's currently being launched. So the way we do that is we say ammo dot, and it's actually physics dot force, or velocity, y. So the force x is ammo dot physics dot velocity y, or I'm sorry, x. And then the y is going to be y. So again, ammo, physics, velocity, x, and y for each of them. And then the image point, we can go ahead and just leave that at 0. So now let's go ahead and test that, and we'll see if we can actually split our ammo into 2 as it's being flown. So I'll go ahead and hit the space bar, and as you can see, it does split it into 2. Now you'll see it only works once. You can't do it multiple times. And if you make multiple shots, well, let's go on to the next level here where I've got more. So if you shoot multiple times and you've got 5, you can't spawn them. As I hit the space bar, you'll see it won't spawn. It'll only spawn if there's only 1 on the screen. This gives us another advantage if we want to shoot high and then be able to kind of drop, if you will, another ammo down. So now the next thing to do is just to add out additional levels. So we've just created 2 levels. So now that we have all of the logic in place, we can go ahead and create an additional level. So we'll go ahead and just do a right click on layout 2 and duplicate, and create a level 3, and duplicate, create a level 4. And then we'll go ahead and create 5 levels. And then the 6th level will be our end level, our end screen. So go ahead and add in those other levels 3, 4, and 5. And then don't put anything new on level 6. We'll go ahead and change that one to be our finish screen. All right, now that we have all of the levels filled out, I've opened up level 6. And what we're going to do for level 6 is this will just be our end screen so that the user knows they've gotten all the way to the end. Otherwise, it just kind of, they finish a level and nothing happens, because when we go to the next level, there isn't a next level. So what we're going to do here is our score and our attempts will continue to increase as we go from level to level. So we'll go ahead and leave those on the screen. We'll go ahead and take this cannon off. We'll just drag that down. And then over here, we've got our whatever the level was you duplicated. You'll have your kind of tower over here, your blocks over here. Let's just select all those and delete them, because we don't need those anymore. Then what we're going to do is we're going to change this screen so it's just this one width. So we'll go ahead and just change the layout size to 720 by 480. So now you'll see this is just the screen, because we're not going to have any activity on this screen. It's just going to be a you win screen. Now I'm going to go ahead and just build a real quick structure here, just so that we kind of have something on that final screen, even though we're not actually going to break anything. So we'll go ahead and add these in. And because I duplicated that layer, the background is no longer locked. So let me lock that real quick. And then I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this, rotate that to 0, stretch it out. And then I'm going to just put a prize on top, just so that it looks nice. All right. Move that over a little bit. All right, and then we're gonna do one last thing, and that is just we're gonna put a message on the screen that says winning, or you won, so that you know you're at the end. So we'll go ahead and create a new text, and we'll go ahead and just say you won, and then I'm gonna change the font size to be larger, and I'm gonna also change the color to be that red again. So we'll make this a little bit bigger. So now the player knows that they've won. They've come to the end of the game. The last thing I'm going to do is I'd like this to actually flash. And so to do that, I'm going to add a behavior. I'm going to add the flash behavior. Now the flash behavior doesn't have any properties. You'll see right here it says no properties. And in order to get it to flash, we actually have to call an event. So what we're going to do that is we're just going to go back to our event sheet, and we're going to say system. We're going to say on start of layout, And it doesn't matter that this will happen on every layout because that win message is only going to be on the last one. But on start of layout, we're going to call this winning message. I didn't rename it, so it's just called text. I'm going to say flash. I'm going to let it flash on and off, and I'm going to say a duration of, I'm just going to type in a bunch of 9s here just so that it runs the entire time. So it'll flash forever. So now we can just go ahead and test this last level out real quick, and you'll see that that U1 message will show up and flash. So there we go. Oh, I didn't move my cannon far enough off, so it actually shows up. Let's go ahead and move that a little further off. I didn't see, I should put it further down. You can also just delete it outright because it's not going to actually do anything on this level. So there you go. So when you get to the end, this will be where you want. Now if you want, you can actually adjust these blocks here so that it does something on that last level. So for example, what you could do is you could set this star to fall down, if you will, and land. So you just get a little bit of an effect, kind of, hey, you've won, you've come to the very end. So you can just have those pop in like that. So there you have it. There's our completed game. We'll go ahead and play that, and that's it. Unless you wanted to do something different, you can add more levels, or if you want to add some additional logic, go right ahead.